Hey guys, what's going on? It's Halsey Schider with the Helicopter Podcast. And I am just grateful. I'm grateful for the podcasts, mainly because of the community that it has created within the helicopter world. I don't know much about anything else other than helicopters. And so to be able to come to you guys every week, every Tuesday, of course, and chat with new friends and old friends and everyone in between about helicopters and all the amazing things that my guests share on this show with you guys, our listeners, is just absolutely incredible. Big shout out to MHM Publishing, home of Vertical, for producing this podcast, and of course the HeliCASTS platform. If you haven't checked out the HeliCASTS platform with the Hangar Z, the Real Rescue, the Vertical MRO, you are missing out. Essentially, it's your one-stop shop for everything helicopters. And buckle up, because today is, I think, going to be a superior episode with a gentleman that has a just tremendous resume. In fact, when he emailed me his resume, he had to tell me, like, this could probably be like 15 pages, but I'm just going to give you a one-page bullet point. So, Woody McClendon, welcome to the Helicopter Podcast. How are you doing, bud?
Fine, sir. Thank you for having me. This will be a great pleasure.
Yeah, this is awesome. Now, is this your first podcast experience?
It is.
Wow. Well, very cool. Well, I'm honored. Now, do you know John from the Hangar Z podcast? Because he was messaging me yesterday. He was like, hey, don't screw it up with Woody. He's awesome.
We met at HAI this last year. And we chatted for a while, and you know how things go at HAI. You have these chats, and then we all disappear in smoke somewhere else. So yeah, we did spend some time together.
That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah,
he's a great guy. He has great things to say about you. You're a pilot. You're an author. Your book, When the Angel Calls, all about air medical and your experience. We're going to talk about that today. And you're a contributor to multiple publications, including Vertical. In fact, that's how we got connected, is through one of the editors over at Vertical. And so I'm just thankful, again, for that relationship that I have with Vertical, because it allows me to have these conversations with guys like yourself. So you met John at HAI. Have you been attending HAI for a long time, or has it kind of been sporadic for you?
Decades.
Last HAI was the 75th anniversary, I think, which was ironic because I guess the very first HAI was in Anaheim. And then this past year, it was back in Anaheim 75 years later. Admittedly, I didn't even realize that helicopters had been around for that long. So I thought that was pretty wild. And I have not been attending decades. I've been in the industry for about 15, 16 years. And this last 3 years have been my experience in going to HAI. Absolutely love it. It's always crazy for me because I'm doing my helicopter stuff, which is my primary business, and I'm doing my podcast stuff, which is my side hustle and something I actually enjoy doing the most at HAI. So it's just so much fun, great networking. How do you feel? You've been in the industry for a long time. What does it mean to you that HAI has rebranded into this vertical lift kind of blanket? Do you have thoughts and opinions on all that?
I do. I mean, I think most of us that are, I'm sure you agree with me, that whole eVTOL thing is this big new technical spasm that's landed in our midst. And again, most of us who've been around for a while look at it and go like, this is going to work someday, but it's
totally
they haven't even come out of the gate yet. I think the guys at HAI, Jem and company, were wise to make that transition, recognizing that once the eVTOL thing starts to become real and gathers momentum, it will end up like blanketing the helicopter business.
100%.
So it's a very smart strategic move on their part to say, yeah, look, we already have the grasp of the vertical world, and so we want to continue to be the media and government sort of source for as it evolves into eVTOL. So yeah, strategically, it's a good idea.
It's a little bit wonky, to be honest, in how I feel, because I think as a human, we're all kind of reluctant to change, and very much so when it comes to helicopters. We're very happy with the current state of helicopters for the most part. But I agree with you. I think eVTOL and other aircraft, are going to be at some point, kind of transitioning into this industry. Lots of crazy things happening. I did a podcast with a guy named Hector. He's the CEO and founder of Rotor.ai, I think it is, or Rotor, which is, autonomy. And they've actually successfully already done an autonomous flight in the R-22. So all these crazy things happening. And, I think it's a long way out. I think specifically when it comes to certification. And I think the government actually needs to kind of figure out a little bit, because I think some of the things that we're seeing in the existing helicopter world, specifically around certification, is things are taking so much longer now because of the eVTOL and other resources being kind of sucked up in order to go there. So,
Very good point.
I'm okay with the industry moving forward. I think we have to be, but I do feel like until our regulators are able to be properly staffed and kind of fully grasp and understand the certification and not let certification lax because of it, so we're not causing incidents or accidents. But it's just kind of a crazy thing. But anyway, HI is great, and that's going to be VAI now. Again, they're a sponsor of the podcast, and I greatly appreciate them and what they do for our community and for our industry. What is it about HAI that has had you go back for decades now?
Well, I still find it a fun high point of my operating year, because I see lots of people I've known for a long time, and it's always exciting to see the developments, year by year. So, to your point about evolution and change, the helicopter business I came to it after I was an airplane pilot, and it's always been traditionally about 20 years behind airplane guys in terms of development. And certainly as a group has tended to be reluctant and to pick up change. And you see that as cockpits have gotten much more sophisticated, and so many of the helicopter pilots out there flying are eyes glaze over. I don't really want to have to do this, or why do I have to do this? And I don't understand this stuff. And that's that's kind of the way the industry is. Does it has to, aviation in particular is a very high rate evolutionary kind of an enterprise on many fronts. So the helicopter business needs to do that. And I think Airbus in particular is doing a great job of leading the charge in terms of technology. The H-160, a clean sheet helicopter that's amazing, just amazing, aerodynamically, structurally, cockpit-wise, flying philosophy. It's really a very exciting ship. So, and so it's always fun at HEI to see people out there pushing the boundaries. You mentioned this whole thing about AI and automation and there's a aviation-wide, very deep-rooted push to get pilots out of the cockpit. Airbus on the airplane side has got a very high-energy initiative to go down to one pilot, and airliners and eventually zero pilots. And I hate to be, I pride myself on being a tech guy who's interested in embracing technology, and in so many ways, technology has been good for us. The idea of having big airplanes flying around with no pilots makes absolutely no sense. I don't care how good AI is, and I think it's coming at us as well. In the helicopter business, we have this one company that's got now this Robbie Robinson that you fly with an iPad and a little stick. And you think, well, okay, good luck getting that certified. I mean, FAA has no even concept of how to make that fit. Is it a great idea? Ultimately, I guess it is. All of that has to be, the big common denominator in assessing all of that is, does it make things safer or not? Or does it create hidden ways that this thing can cause damage? So anyway, long diatribe about HAI, VAI. It's a great part of my life every year.
That's awesome. I mean, I think it's both, in the future. I think in the beginning, we're going to think that a lot of the new technology is going to do amazing things. And then I think we're going to find out that there's a lot of hiccups and flaws along the way, and issues and incidents and accidents. I think long term, as things get ironed out and we really fully understand, then, I think at that point, that's when the industry really changes. And I think that could happen in my lifetime. I'm 36 years old now. And so I'm thinking that, by the time I'm, call it, near 70, late 60s, I'm guessing, 30 years from now, the industry is probably going to look very, very different. And probably even sooner than that. I'm just very curious to see where it goes. You've been a passionate aviator. Something that you shared with me before when we thought we were recording was that you started flying. You got your soloed on your 16th birthday, which is similar to my experience as well. I soloed on my 16th birthday in a 1946 Aranca Champ, little tail dragger.
Great airplane.
It's a great airplane. So what year was that? And was it essentially one of those things where like you just caught the aviation bug young?
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsboro Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.
I did catch the aviation bug young, and I think it was about 61, somewhere in there. And I soloed the J3 Cub and then flew the Champ, which was a big upgrade from the Cub. And then later instructed in the Citabria, which is a great airplane.
Aerobatics backwards, right?
It is beautiful aerobatics. So
my buddy Justin, passionate aviator, but does it as a hobby. He has a Citabria. I actually haven't gone for a ride yet. So Justin, if you're listening, come on, bro. What are we waiting for? I would love the opportunity to fly that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful airplane. So my first job so then I got an engineering degree, went to work as a flight test engineer at Boeing, spent about 5 years there, and was lucky enough to be on a NASA project where we were doing some of the very first fly-by-wire studies, it was like grad school. It was really exciting. And then I saw that I was going to have to settle down to the Boeing routine. And I thought, it's not my thing. So it took me a few years to get in the groove, but I ended up at Hughes. helicopters as a sales guy. And so I did my rotor transition with them and got a lot of time in 500s and 300s out racing around the country and doing demos and all that. It was great. And then it's been, from then, a sort of mix of helicopter, airplane, and so forth, back and forth. Total about 10 years as an air medical pilot. The first of that in the mid 80s, when I took over the UCLA MedStar program, that was in kind of a mess at the time, being run by a vendor. And as a UCLA employee, I was charged with changing the unit around. We did a pretty good job of that. We brought in a nicely equipped 222 and went for about 5 years. And then the hospital had a huge fiscal crisis and canceled the program. And so then I went to Michigan and flew a 412 for a hospital there for a couple of years, and then got up back in the jet business. And fast forward to the end of my career, I spent 5 years at Native Air in Arizona, and left there in 2010. So anyway, that was that air medical part was, I felt, quite significant because it's such a, we always hear about the air medical business, even in the industry, and not a lot about it anywhere else. And people forget the great grand fact that air medical guys save 45,000 lives a year. I mean, that's a lot of people. And the good portion of those guys would not be alive if the helicopter wasn't there to fly them to a hospital.
Yeah, it's just a crazy, when you emailed me that figure, I didn't actually know that figure, and that was really neat to fathom. I often talk about that from a perspective of, there's a lot of helicopter hate in the world, whether people are scared of helicopters, whether there's high profile accidents like the Kobe Bryant accident, which was not great for our industry, or the noise. That's a big issue. A lot of people that live near hospitals, airports, things like that, they really hate the noise of helicopters. And I always like to remind those folks, like, hey, look, of course, helicopters, like any machine, are dangerous to a point, but they've saved so many lives, whether it's in air medical, whether it's, military, whatever it may be. I mean, helicopters are incredible machines. And even one further than the lives that are saved, in my sales business, I've really got to understand and learn that so much of our world economy is on the back of helicopters, whether it's in the utility business, on the agricultural side, so many practical uses, not just life-saving uses, but also just economic reasons as well. So it's just, obviously we're biased, right, Woody? We're helicopter people, so we have to praise them, but it really is the honest truth. I want to tell you, Woody, a little bit about my air medical experience, and I want you to tell me how different that was from especially your experience in the 1980s flying the Triple Deuce. First off, I'm jealous. I think the Triple Deuce is one of the coolest looking helicopters, and would have loved the opportunity to fly one. Pretty hard to do these days. I know that there's a couple that are still in service and flying around. I saw one actually when I was at the F1 event in Texas a couple of years ago. There was a Triple Deuce going back and forth. But my air medical experience, which wasn't long, admittedly, it wasn't for me. I didn't like the nights. I'm a little bit of a prima donna, I guess, about getting up, getting woken up, and it just wasn't best for me. And I was passionate about sales, so I kind of got out of it. But I did it for 2 years. And that ended 4 years ago, so fairly recent. And my experience was this. I was flying a single-engine aircraft, either the 407 or the Long Ranger. I was at Air Evac Live Team. My training was phenomenal. It was 3 to 4 weeks long. They stressed crew resource management. They talked all about working with the medic and the nurse as a team and not just the whole self-loading baggage. The aircraft were heavily equipped, even for single engine. We had a 2-axis autopilot. We had glass cockpit with the Garmin 500. We had the 650 GPS, which was super easy to put coordinates in. We had NVG filters and compatible cockpits. Myself and one of the flight crew members on the opposite side of the helicopter would wear NVGs. So you can see where I'm getting. We had a lot of great technology. For me, I could be woken up at 3 a.m, know the weather, can easily type the coordinates in the GPS, and I'm there. If you wouldn't mind, share with me what EMS was like in 1980 when you started flying that, or in the 80s, compared to my first experience, because I'm guessing it was drastically different.
So that's an interesting question, because our 222 was the one with the wheels, and it had the full single pilot IFR cockpit. So being in Santa Monica, where you have over the clouds in the middle of the night, marine layer, we would often launch and use our exemption that we didn't have a paying patient aboard, and do a Part 91 instrument climb through the overcast to go on our mission, and come back and do the Santa Monica VOR approach to get down. And it was beautiful. It was really great. 5-inch attitude indicator and dual axis 4-channel autopilot. So it was great. Fast forward to Native Air. So I joined them in 2006. And so we didn't have goggles. And of course, an A-Star, none of the A-Stars had autopilots. So the very scenario you're talking about, we get wakened up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're going halfway to Albuquerque. And once you leave Phoenix, there's no lights. It's black. And you think, so I don't have a horizon. Why is this not IFR?
Yeah, seriously.
Here I am with a 3-inch attitude indicator, and I have a lot of instrument time, but nothing like that. And I found that's what caused me to write this book, actually, because I thought, this is scary.
100%.
And we got goggles a couple of years later, and everybody said, oh, this is a solution to night flying. You think, no, it's not. It's better than nothing, but goggles have a lot of restrictions. And it still didn't help the problem that around Arizona is a lot of open country where there's no weather reporting because there's nothing out there. And so what were you going to encounter? You had no idea. And I just thought, I don't know how people can run a business doing this. It's not, how does this even work? And in those days, we were having a lot of accidents. 2008, 35 people died in the U.S. in aeronautical based accidents. And I was writing for one of the magazines at the time, and wrote an article about what was going on and how we were talking around the industry about it. And I got crazy and figured out a high-tech cockpit that would be still manual flying, but would take advantage of what technologies we had then, and thought, no one's going to listen to this. But I thought to myself, oh, at least I tried. To this day, when you talk to aeronautical line pilots, they all, it's the big dark secret no one wants to talk about. Flying around at 3 o'clock in the morning, at least with what you have, helps, but you're not within the IFR system, so you don't have the terrain clearance. You don't have any of the guarantees that instrument airspace gives you.
100%. Yeah. And even that, there's, not just flying airport to airport at 3 a.m, but oftentimes flying airport to middle of nowhere ranch
Exactly.
or road. That's what always really bothered me. I mean, I was in Texas, right? It's flat as can be. We had some hills that would enter coming into San Antonio, but other than that, terrain was never a big issue for me. But it was this, man, even with goggles landing on an unapproved, we called it an unapproved area, meaning, it wasn't an airport. It was the highway. It was a back road. It was a ranch. Very difficult to see, not even difficult, impossible really to see power lines and other obstructions that could affect your landing. Yes, you have a volunteer fire department that is supposed to secure a nice, LZ for you. Nothing against good old Jim Bob, from the Dilly volunteer fire department, but it's not his everyday job. He's welding, during the day and then it's just, to me, that was the scary part. But it's crazy to think since 2008, I mean, we're not even 20 years from that. The air medical industry has become incredibly more safe. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. And credit to companies like Air Evac, again, with training and, really emphasizing this idea of crew resource management, also taking away a lot of the mission pressure, having very cut and dry minimums, and you had to live within those minimums. And even if it's above minimums, if you as a pilot or a crew member don't feel comfortable, you don't go. And there's no repercussion. I think that's probably one of the biggest factors that are saving lives, is that mission pressure is away. But yeah, it's still a very unique industry. In other countries, it's typically twin engine helicopters, dual pilot, not flying at night, or at least not landing on unapproved areas at night, flying within the IFR system. So, like many things in aviation, the U.S. definitely is behind when it comes to air medical.
It is.
Which is just one of those things. Well, I'm fascinated to hear about your book. So it's called When the Angel Calls. And I actually haven't had the chance to read it. Otherwise I would have before this, but I think maybe now that we're friends, maybe I can get a copy. Just going to throw it out there.
You gotta know people.
Okay, I'll try. I know the author. So I guess, kind of this idea of your experience inspired you to write it, but what's really the deeper purpose of writing the book, and what led you to do that? And what has been the feedback from people within the industry?
So the thing that the initial inspiration was two things. One was this crazy flying that you and I talked about, and the fact that it's even within the aviation industry, people don't realize what aeromedical helicopter pilots do. And then the second thing was just watching the medical crews work. These flight nurses are amazing people. They do trauma care out of a backpack that would stretch the resources of an emergency room. And I've watched so many times. You land, you watch them get out. You know the situation. There's blood everywhere and car pieces or whatever, and they will bring patients back that are way up on the trauma score, to the point where are they going to make it? And then they stabilize them in the flight, and they get to the ER and they save their lives. I mean, that level of skill and dedication, nobody knows about that. It's another one of those things that these are some of the finest medical people in the United States.
Well, the other part about that too, Woody, that's always boggled me is we don't have to necessarily get too into the weeds about it, because this is an uplifting podcast, but we've talked recently about helicopter pay and salaries. And there's a bit of a kind of an issue in my problem with salaries as pilots. But the air medical crew, at least from what I'm experienced with, is 100% agree with you. Amazing. In fact, I thought I knew what a nurse or a paramedic was, and then I started working air medical, and I'm like, Oh, that's what you guys are. We're talking about guys and gals that will enter a ER in the middle of nowhere, and there'll be a doctor shaking to scope, to insert an airway into a patient, and he's looking at my paramedic that gets paid significantly less than he does and says, can you do it? And then maintaining that patient's airway and pushing drugs and keeping them alive in a helicopter where you can barely move around, right?
Right.
I mean, you can't even get up. If the patient codes, you land and they start giving CPR once you're on the ground. I mean, it's this crazy thing. And here they are, they work second jobs at the hospital so they can pay their bills. It's just absolutely crazy to me. Because I agree. I think that the medical techs, the nurses and paramedics that are flying in the back of helicopters are absolutely incredible. I see in chapter 1 here, it's Another Dark Morning is the title of the chapter. Tell me about that, and what is that story all about?
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
So the structure of the book is kind of around a flight that I lead the reader into, and I describe it's a dark, rainy night, and I'm in the middle of this flight where I'm actually I'm sort of in and out. I mean, I'm basically it's a constant Edinburgh IMC night, and so I'm describing for the lay person what that experience is like, and the fact that I sort of have control of the situation, but not really, and we have a patient aboard and all that, and it's like 100 miles to Phoenix, and then after I sort of leave the story at that point and say, we're going to finish this later in the book. So then I go up, then the other chapters are a lot of different flying scenarios. And then in the last about 3/4 of the book, I picked that flight back up. And we're really in trouble. I mean, it's raining like crazy. It's turbulent, and I know I've got 20 more minutes of doing this, and thinking, I don't know if this is going to work out. and so and finally it does. We land, and patient gets taken in, life is saved, all that, and so that's at the very end of the book, and I actually decide at the end of that shift, I go home and think, I am done. I'm going to go talk to the boys and tell them they need to put somebody else in here.
The crazy part about that, Woody, is that we're not talking, this didn't happen in the 1980s. This was, 2010 timeframe?
Yes.
Which is crazy to me. And in fact, I didn't realize that the statistics of 2008 with the deaths of 35, I mean, that's just staggering. What was it? Because I look at what you're telling me, and again, I don't know the whole story. I haven't actually read the book, unfortunately, but I promise I will. Is, at least in my air medical experience, call it, nearly 15 years later, we probably wouldn't launch. We had very strict minimums. If I launch, but it looks hazy, I would have an operational control center saying, turn around, you're not going. We have a risk matrix. We have all these things that would probably stop that flight. What was it about the air medical industry in that era that was just kind of the thing? It was just go? I mean, what what was kind of the direction from that company? And was it a thing, kind of profit over safety and things like that?
Exactly. Well, it was. There was a great push. There was pressure from managers to take flights. And when you turned down a flight, you got a phone call admonishing you and, veiled threat, sort of. And I felt like, I didn't need that job to pay my rent, and so I often thought, I should just stop. These people are pushing me to do things that I know are not right. A lot of the pilots who had been there a long time, they did depend on that job for their living, and so they would cave in. So there was a lot of pressure. At that point, that company was owned by a small private equity group out of Chicago, and these guys were ruthless about expense and about taking flights.
And I don't know really how the breakdown is now in air medical, but there was a period in time where a lot of the companies were actually owned by private equity, including some of the very large, big players. And since that time, things have really changed around. GMR has become a fairly large and behemoth with, Medtrans and Air Evac and Reach and all together. And again, I was kind of under that umbrella, and I was very impressed with how they operated because it was nothing like that. It was no mission pressure, no phone calls. In fact, my direct boss was a guy that would, I could call him and say, hey, by the way, someone questioned me, which happened one time. I had a program director question me through calling another pilot. He called a nearby base and said, hey, would you have gone flying? Halsey turned down this flight. And Wynn got back to me, and that pissed me off. And so I talked to my boss, and let's just say that didn't happen again because it was a very strict, no pressure. You could have a clear night, severe clear, and turn down a flight. No one would call and ask you why. Now, if you keep doing it over and over, they might then start to ask. But my experience, by and large, was really positive with that. But I think for a long time, there was that awkward period where these companies were owned by private equity. And what's the purpose of private equity? It's to make money, right? It's a bottom line deal. And I think that in air medical specifically, you can probably get away with those flights that you were just talking about so many times. But on the 100th time you do it, it's going to bite you, right?
It is.
And I think it took a really long time for these money folks to start realizing that accidents are extremely expensive. And I don't know if the industry's changed because they want less people to die. I honestly think it's just because they finally figured out over a 20-year period that, oh man, if we crash helicopters, it actually amortizes out to be more money in the long term, right? And so it's interesting now that there's a big push for safety. And again, I think actually safety then reduces the bottom. It's actually better for the bottom line. I really believe that. Air Evac would have 10 plus, inadvertent IMC events a year, still to this day with everything in place. Not an issue, right? You put your HeliCASTS on, you fly your procedure that you've done training on 1 million times, and you're good to go, right? But 20 years ago, that could very easily be an accident or multiple accidents.
Yeah, it often was. A whole bunch of those accidents that year, 2008, were inadvertent IMC.
Yeah, and that's honestly always scared me the most. Obviously, aviators to aviators, we're very familiar with inadvertent. Obviously, a situation like with the Kobe accident that I talked about earlier was, you almost can't even call it inadvertent because there are so many signs leading up to going in the soup in that one. But I do think that long term, these companies finally kind of got wise. And I know that some of the private equity big groups ended up selling and getting out. But, obviously accidents and people dying is expensive. It's not good for business. So, I'm glad to see that it's moving in a different direction. I know that was a scary experience for you, and that's something that you write about. And obviously, it's a great story to tell because it really paints the picture of the wildness of what you were doing at that time for probably not a great salary. Let's be honest.
Oh no, it was terrible.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the other funny part about it. What about the positive side? Obviously, there's something about air medical that you've been around the business for a long time. What's a experience that was memorable? What are things that you carry with you to this day that give you a lot of pride about being an air medical pilot?
So we did fly a lot of missions where, had we not been there, that person would not have survived. And those were always inspiring. I think, you get in the helicopter to fly back to base at 4:30 in the morning, and there's a lot of sort of pride in the cabin, like, wow, we did this. We saved this guy's life, and that's a rush in itself.
It's incredible, really, to know that you impact that person. Especially for me as a pilot, I didn't get into pilot to help people. To be honest, I got into it because I liked flying helicopters. I thought it'd be fun, and then fast forward, here you are on your first air medical flight, which is one that you definitely remember, and you look to your left, and there's some little feet next to you, and there's a person that's having a really bad day, and you're a part of their story. Now they're going to have a secondary bad day when they get the bill, and that's another whole ball of wax. When we talk about air medical and how we do things here in the United States, is just the funding of it all. But again, you're helping that person in need, and it's a really neat feeling. I've been able to help kids, which is very rewarding. Guy got his leg lobbed off one time. We literally had to put it in a bag that was on top of him. Med crew saved his life, gave him blood. Incredible. Just amazing things that you never actually think about when you're going to flight school. And so I 100% agree. Just that feeling of, wow, I can't believe my training, my skill was a part of this person's story.
That's true.
It's really neat.
That's a huge thing. And I think the relationships within the med crew, I'm friends. I still stay in touch with a couple of nurses I flew with in Michigan long time ago. And most of the UCLA, actually a couple of people from UCLA as well. And certainly a number of them from Native Air. So, and some of the pilots as well. And those, it's always fun to talk to them. I sent them all a copy of the book. This is its second spasm on the market. And the first one, I sent it to all the nurses I knew, and then called them and said, "What'd you think?" And they had a lot of great things to say about just what we're talking about. That interestingly enough, the 4 flight nurses at Native Air I sent to, none of them were working for Native Air anymore. They were all had moved on to other jobs in medicine, but all we together sort of recalled, some of our flights together and realized we had done a great thing.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's an absolutely a neat experience that I will always take away as being something that I feel very excited and happy about doing. Also, some really fun flying. Closing down a highway during the day, I really enjoyed. I got to close down I-35 a couple times, which you always kind of feel bad because, you've been in the other position where you're stuck in that traffic. But it's a pretty neat feeling landing on an overpass.
It is.
Love landing on hospital helipads, on the buildings. Ground pads are cool too, but, landing on a building, doesn't really get much better than that. There's a heart hospital specifically in San Antonio. It was just on the north end of town, and I think it was like a 15-story pad. So you land on this pad, and it was a real quiet pad. So you would just wait for your crew. Typically they would call you if another bird was coming in, but it never happened to me. And I would just sit there, loved it at like dusk when the city lights were just kind of turning on. Just an absolutely incredible experience, and certainly a rewarding career. A lot of my listeners are guys and gals that are thinking about getting into helicopters. There might be young people, they might be middle-aged and just wanting a career change. And if you ask the majority of them, I bet you they would tell you they want to fly air medical. So first and foremost, where can they find your book? So when they're done listening to this, they can go and purchase the book and hear your firsthand account. But secondly, what is some advice that you would be giving a pilot entering in air medical and things that will help make them successful?
So the book's on Amazon, so that's easy.
Easy.
Go to Amazon, put in When the Angel Calls, and
what I'll do too is in the link to this podcast, we can put the Amazon link to it. So
okay, good.
If you're listening, just go to the link, click it, buy it, support Woody, and also educate yourself on what you're getting into. And what about the advice part, Woody?
This podcast is brought to you by HeliCASTS. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. HeliCASTS handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter is sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at HeliCASTS today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-HeliCASTS, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.
So also one thing, our good buddy Brent Bundy.
Oh, yep.
He did the cover.
Looks great.
Yeah. I mean, what a brilliant piece of artwork. So that's a good question. I mean, talking to younger guys who are contemplating a career in helicopters, I mean, you hit on this, Halsey, a little bit, but I would not. I point out that the EMS pilots are the most poorly paid in the industry. So if you've just created the national debt in flight training, you need to look for a job that pays well, and air medical doesn't offer that. So you can go to work for PHI as a junior line pilot and move up through that system over the years to where you're making a very good living flying a larger helicopter, on just like an airline. So I wouldn't really counsel anybody to do it. A good friend of mine who retired from a police department in the Bay Area, Oakland area, had run his police department's unit, and he was looking for something to do. And he said, "Well, I'm thinking about going to work for this air medical company." And I said, "I think you know better, don't you?" But he really wanted to, and so he actually ended up. He called me back after his first 3:00 in the morning flight, and he said, "I was scared to death." And I said, "Very intelligent of you." And he ended up telling the company he was resigning because he wasn't going to fly any more night flights. So, of course, all these air medical companies are desperately short of pilots. So they made a deal for him to stay on as a relief pilot doing days only.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, if I was ever to go back, that's the only way I would do it. I agree. And something that people like about my podcast is the transparency. I don't try to hide anything about my experience. My experience was I didn't like the nights. And actually, if you talk to 9 out of 10 air medical pilots, they're going to tell you a similar story. I think some are more vocal, right? Like me. Part of my problem too is I had buddies that didn't love the nights, but they were able to sleep and fall asleep. For me, I never tried to shift my whole schedule around. I would just at least try to get some rest, but I would just lay there and I would anticipate the alarm going off. And so even on a night that I wouldn't fly, I would just end up staying up and having this horrible insomnia, for like a week straight. And then that screws you up for 3 or 4 days into your off time. And it just was this, it can't be good, right? It just can't be good for the body. And,
No.
I don't want my listeners to think that air medical isn't something that they shouldn't do or is something that they shouldn't do. If you're passionate and you've always had a dream of doing air medical, I would still encourage you to do it. The good news is pay is getting better. It has to get better, right? Or else they're not going to be able to get pilots.
Right.
Geo modifications for undesirable locations is getting better. Safety is light years better than it was even in the early to mid 2000s.
Right.
Speaking from my experience, and I know guys that are at Air Methods and guys that are at Metro and other operators that I didn't fly at, Life Flight Network, and they all have great experience with safety and pressure. But the honest reality of it is it's a very hard job. It's a thankless job when it comes to pay. And there's good parts, but yeah, it's certainly an interesting perspective that you bring. So you hung up the flight helmet, so to speak, in 2010, but I know you've continued to work. What have you been up to, and what are you doing now?
So after that, I thought, well, I have this long list of things I'm not going to do anymore, and a very short list of things I'll still consider doing. And so I ended up in flight safety, and went through the instructor course, which, even as cynical, beat up as I am, I found a profoundly positive experience. Their training for instructors is like none other anywhere, and it was very good. And then taught the 407, and then was going to be on the AW139 team. And but it was at a location. We were living in Arizona at the time. This was going to be a move to back east to a place that once I'd been there, I thought, this is not going to be, we're not moving here.
Yeah, totally.
So after about a year, I was able to get into sales and then moved home and worked out of my house and traveled for the company. So I did that for about 10 years. It was great fun. We did a lot of, we pushed a lot of new business in the helicopter segment. And I was very deeply involved in creating that Denver Learning Center with the guys at Air Methods. And so side note to that, another piece of data that historically that's profound. Air Methods had pretty reliably 2 fatal accidents a year. In 2017, they started doing SIM training at the Flight Safety Learning Center. 5 SIMs, 1 of each type in there. So they've done a complete transition to a simulator training program, just like the airlines. And since 2017, they have not had a fatal accident.
Well, I love that. Yeah, I mean, I 100% can imagine that. And I say that because at Air Evac, part of the initial training and the yearly training was a simulator session. And then quarterly, you would have to go to an off-base sim section. And it wasn't like a flight safety simulator, but it was a good procedural simulator in the fact that you could go and really brush up on your inadvertent IMC procedure to the point where I think most of the Air Evac guys and gals could probably do the procedure kind of in their sleep, right? It just becomes total muscle memory, and it's known. They also encourage you to take the helicopter out with your flight crew and do inadvertent entry into IMC in the actual helicopter, flying the RNAV approach with the HeliCASTS. I mean, it's incredible, again, with the technology. And so I definitely see how the use of flight simulators has probably greatly enhanced the safety. And that's a really neat statistic that you share.
Yeah, it is very profound. So then we moved from Arizona to Tacoma, Washington, to be near our grandsons. And so I thought, well, maybe I should retire. And flight safety was starting through the transition with the NetJets guys taking over the management. And I thought this would be a good time to retire. So I retired and enjoyed life at home with Linda. And about 12 months into that, I thought, what am I doing here? This is not good. I happened to, so I was continuing to go to HAIs on my own. And so the HAI in Dallas 3 years ago.
My first one.
Huh?
That was my first one.
Oh, wow.
I exhibited. So my first ever HAI, not only did I attend, but I also exhibited for helicopter. So talk about a baptism by fire.
No kidding. Good for you. Good for you.
Good times.
So anyway, I was walking the floor with a couple of friends of mine. I had a little bit of recognition because I'd written a lot of articles in vertical and mostly vertical. Anyway, we were walking the floor and we saw the Loft Dynamics. It was then VRM exhibit. And I said, I think we've heard something about that sim. We ought to go over there and kind of butt our way into the demo stream. So we walked up and they were fairly accommodating and slipped us in. And I jumped in this thing and they turned it on and I'm sitting in a hover and I pick it up sitting on the ground, pick it up to a hover and oh, this is quite real. Flew it around the pattern and just landed. And I thought, this is exactly like the A-Star. The flight safety A-Star sim is pretty good, but it wasn't near as good as this. And I got out, started talking to the two Swiss guys there, and they said, well, we should talk about getting together. And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. So some months later, we worked that out, and I became the first U.S. sales guy. And dealing with the Loft guys, it's a young startup company, so it's just like unbounded energy and enthusiasm and bright eyed, like, wow, what are we doing here? And the sim just keeps getting better and better and better. We now have a demonstration center at Santa Monica Airport, so I get to fly that a lot, and it never ceases to amaze me how this is kind of a commercial, but the fact is it flies very much like the real aircraft, and it's interesting. You like go to a trade show, and the average helicopter pilot is not a particularly demonstrative person, and you can put 20 people through that, and all 20 of them will come out and say, wow, that was really something. So that's been great fun. And it's great it's a great way for me to stay in the business and do it with some really great people.
That's awesome. I'm guessing Loft will be at European Rotors in Amsterdam?
Yes.
That's great, because I will be there, and I'll actually be doing in-person podcasting and doing some other fun content. So after we hang up here, it would be great for an introduction to be able to podcast with those guys at the show and experience. I actually have not flown. I don't think I've flown the Loft sim. I flew a VR Leonardo sim. I don't know if that's a product of Loft or not, but it was VR, and oh my gosh, the experience was incredible. And so I'd love to be able to do the Loft sim in Amsterdam this year.
They will be there. I'll get you I'll hook you up with the right guys. They'd love to see you.
Get me with the right guys. It's all about knowing the right people.
That's it.
And again, if they're open to it, I would love to actually sit down and podcast with them live from Amsterdam. In fact, if you're listening to the podcast right now and you're going to be at European Rotors, let me know. Halsey is the best way to find me on Instagram, and I'll be there. It's early November. European Rotors was my first experience last year in Spain. Had such a good time. And this year I'm going fully on board with MHM. We're going to be podcasting there with not just the helicopter podcast, but the Hangar Z with John Gray. And I heard a little birdie told me that Jason Quinn, aka Quinny from The Real Rescue, will also be attending. So, man, Woody, it would be great if you can connect me with the Loft guys. And, Woody, I can't believe it. Good conversations happen quickly. We're already coming up on our time. And I just greatly appreciate you coming on, sharing your journey, your experience. Again, we'll put a link for When the Angel Calls, Woody's book, into the description here. Or you can go on Amazon and purchase the book there as well. And if you're interested in learning more, is there a way that people can connect with you through Loft or something like that, Woody?
Yeah, I think using my Loft coordinates would be just fine.
I can, what I'll do, if you're interested in chatting with Woody, let me know via HeliHalsey at Instagram, and I can make a email connection. Woody, I really appreciate it. It's super fun to be able to talk with guys like yourself that have been in this industry for so long. You've obviously had some scary moments in the industry, and some companies specifically back in the day didn't always do things correctly, but it's a wonderful industry despite that.
It is. It really is.
And it's a testament. Look, you tried to retire and you just couldn't, right? And now you're able to do something within the industry. And I'm guessing it's not for the money. Not saying that you don't get paid well, but I'm saying it's probably because you enjoy the camaraderie of all the wonderful people that make up this business. So,
yes.
Woody, thank you so much. And if you're a listener, thank you for checking out this edition of the Helicopter Podcast. If you know someone or you are someone yourself that would like to come and share your experience, please hit me up. Again, it's HeliHalsey on Instagram. You can also look up the Helicopter Podcast and or Helicopter on Facebook, Instagram as well. To our other sponsors, thank you so much for making this show possible.
And LinkedIn.
And you can find me on LinkedIn. As Woody would know, though, I'm not good at responding on LinkedIn. I'm trying to get better. But I know that are you fairly active on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
So that would be a good spot for you to connect with Woody. Also is on LinkedIn. In fact, I think I was reading through emails today and we have a connection and I just have to accept the connection on LinkedIn.
Yes, that's right. I did. I pinged you.
I just
need to do that, Halsey. It's good for business.
I know. I would say that I'm pretty good with business. Lots that I'm learning. Lots to be excited about. One thing that gets a little overwhelming is all the different platforms, right? And man, it's just crazy these days. But networking is so important. So to our listeners, thank you. Woody, thanks again. And to our listeners, we'll get you on the next one. Thanks so much for listening.
Take care.
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsboro Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Helicopter. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. Helicopter handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter has sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at Helicopter today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-HELICOPTER, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. Helicopter. List it, sell it, done.